The sensor array aboard the Galactic Council monitoring station Nexus 7 had never recorded anything quite like it. Senior Sensor Operator Vixens, a tall, insectoid being with compound eyes that could process 17 different spectrums of light simultaneously, stared at the readings with what could only be described as professional confusion. The object approaching their sector was undeniably artificial. Its hull gleamed with an unusual metallic sheen that reflected the light of nearby stars in patterns that suggested advanced manufacturing techniques. The ship was roughly cylindrical, about 2 kilometers in length, with what appeared to be rotating sections that likely provided artificial gravity through centrifugal force. It was elegant in its simplicity, lacking the harsh angular armor plating that characterized most military vessels, yet substantial enough to house a significant population. What made Vexai's antennae twitch nervously wasn't what the sensors detected, but what they didn't. "Run the scan again?" Vexai ordered his junior operator, a young crystalline named Zeph whose translucent body pulsed with confused blue light. "Sir, I've run it 14 times. The results are consistent." Zeph's voice carried the harmonic quality typical of his species, but there was an undertone of bewilderment. No weapon signatures detected. No energy shields. No defensive arrays. No missile bays, plasma cannons, particle beams, or even basic kinetic projectile systems. Vexai's forearms clicked against his console as he processed this information. In his 300 years of service with the Galactic Council, he had overseen first contact with 47 different species. Every single one had approached with weapon systems active, shields raised, and contingency plans for immediate withdrawal if negotiations went poorly. It was the way of the galaxy. It was the way of survival. "Are you certain this isn't some kind of stealth technology? Perhaps their weapons are masked by sophisticated cloaking systems?" Zeph's body flickered through several color combinations as he consulted his instruments. "Sir, our sensors can detect weapons through any known cloaking technology. We've upgraded specifically to counter shadowling phase tech and Voidwalker dimensional weaponry. If they have weapons, they're using technology so advanced that it's beyond our ability to comprehend." The implications of that statement hung in the recycled air of the monitoring station like a toxic cloud. Technology beyond Galactic Council comprehension could mean only one thing. This was either a species so primitive they hadn't developed weapons, or so advanced that their weapons were invisible to every detection method known to the galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations. Neither option was particularly comforting. Vexai activated the emergency communication channel to the Council chamber on the central hub station. Within moments, the holographic form of Council Speaker Thane appeared above his console. Thane was a Titan, one of the original founding species of the Galactic Council, standing nearly 4 meters tall with stone-like skin that had been scarred by countless battles across his millennium of life. Sensor Operator Vexai. Thani's voice rumbled like an avalanche. "Your emergency signal has interrupted a discussion about trade regulations with the Merchant Guild. This had better be significant." "Sir, we have an unidentified vessel approaching the border of Council space. The ship appears to be of unknown origin and design, carrying what we estimate to be several thousand life forms." "But sir," Vexai paused, his training warring with the absurdity of what he was about to report. "They appear to be completely unarmed." Thane's massive head tilted slightly, an expression that in his species indicated either deep thought or profound confusion. "Clarify unarmed, operator." "No detectable weapon systems of any kind, sir. No shields, no defensive arrays, no escort vessels. They're traveling through space in what appears to be a colony ship, with no means of protecting themselves." The silence that followed was so complete that Vexai could hear the subtle harmonics of the station's life support systems. When Thane finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the operator's exoskeleton shiver. Operator Vexai, in the entire recorded history of the Galactic Council, spanning over 10 millennia and contact with 347 distinct species, no civilization has ever made first contact without weapons. The idea is so fundamentally opposed to survival instinct that our xenobiologists have theorized it's impossible. "Yes, sir. I'm aware of the protocols and the historical precedent." "Then you understand why what you're telling me is either a scanning error or the most significant event in galactic history." Vexai's compound eyes shifted through the spectrum as he double-checked his readings one final time. "Sir, I stake my 3 centuries of service record on the accuracy of these scans. That ship carries no weapons." Thane's holographic form flickered as he consulted with other council members off-screen. When he returned his attention to Vexai, his expression had shifted to something the operator had never seen before, uncertainty tinged with what might have been fear. Operator, you are to maintain constant surveillance on this vessel. I am dispatching a full diplomatic fleet to establish first contact. Given the unusual nature of this situation, the fleet will consist of representatives from all major council species, along with our most advanced defensive capabilities. Sir, should we attempt to communicate with them before the diplomatic fleet arrives? Absolutely not. If this is some kind of trap, we will not stumble into it blind. If it's genuine, then we are dealing with a species so fundamentally different from every known form of intelligent life that standard protocols are meaningless. A hologram flickered out, leaving Vexhai alone with his readings and a growing sense of unease. He turned his attention back to the approaching vessel, noting that it maintained a steady course toward the heart of Council space, with no deviation or apparent concern for the military vessels that were undoubtedly moving to intercept it. Meanwhile, aboard the ship that had captured the galaxy's attention, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Horizon, watching the stars slowly shift as they approached what their long-range sensors had identified as the territory of an advanced galactic civilization. She was a woman in her mid-40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades making life-or-death decisions in the depths of space. Beside her stood her first officer, Commander James Okafor, a tall man with dark skin and the kind of steady demeanor that made him invaluable during crisis situations. They had served together for over 15 years, first on Earth's interstellar research vessels and now on humanity's first attempt at genuine interstellar colonization. Captain, Okafor said, consulting the tablet in his hands. Our sensors are detecting increased activity in the region ahead. Multiple large vessels are moving in our direction. Chen nodded, unsurprised. Welcoming committee? Possibly. Or they could be military vessels moving to intercept. Dr. Reeves thinks they might be as curious about us as we are about them. Doctor. Elena Reeves was the Horizon's chief xenobiologist and linguist, one of Earth's leading experts on theoretical alien psychology. Her presence on the mission had been considered essential, given that they were venturing into a region of space where their deep space probes had detected clear signs of multiple advanced civilizations. Any signs of hostile intent? Chen asked. None that we can detect, but our understanding of alien psychology is pretty much limited to educated guesswork at this point. Chen smiled slightly. Good thing we're not carrying anything that could be construed as threatening. It had been one of the most controversial decisions in the history of human space exploration. When the UES Horizon had been designed for its mission to establish humanity's first interstellar colony, the question of armaments had sparked heated debates in the Earth Space Consortium for over 2 years. Military advisors had argued for a full complement of defensive systems, pointing to humanity's own history of violent first contacts between different cultures. But the final decision had come from Dr. Amara Singh, Earth's most respected xenopsychologist, who had presented a compelling argument. Any species advanced enough to build an interstellar civilization would have weapons capable of destroying the Horizon regardless of what defensive systems it carried. Furthermore, arriving armed would immediately classify humanity as a potential threat, while arriving unarmed would demonstrate either supreme confidence or utter harmlessness. In either case, it would provoke curiosity rather than immediate hostility. The decision had been controversial, but ultimately practical. The space that might have been used for weapons and defensive systems had instead been filled with additional colonists, scientific equipment, and resources for establishing their new home. Captain! The voice of Lieutenant Maria Santos came over the ship's communication system from the bridge. We're receiving what appears to be a scanning beam from multiple sources. Nothing invasive, but they're definitely taking a very close look at us. Thank you, Lieutenant. Maintain our current course and speed. If they want to talk, I'm sure they'll find a way to let us know. As if summoned by her words, the ship's main computer announced in its calm, synthetic voice, incoming transmission detected. Source: multiple vessels bearing 27 Mark IV. Signal appears to be in an unknown language using mathematical progressions as a foundation for communication. Chen and Okafor exchanged glances. This was it. First contact with an alien civilization. Everything they had trained for. Everything humanity had dreamed of since first looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone. Dr. Reeves to the bridge, please, Chen announced over the ship's communication system. It looks like our new neighbors want to chat. As they made their way to the bridge, Chen reflected on the magnitude of what they were about to experience. Humanity was about to announce its presence to the galaxy, and they were doing it completely unarmed, carrying nothing but hope, curiosity, and the absolute confidence that they could handle whatever they encountered. It was either the bravest decision in human history or the most catastrophically foolish. Within the hour, they would begin to find out which. The diplomatic fleet that assembled to greet humanity was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in over 1,000 years. Ships from 12 different species formed a complex formation around the approaching human vessel, each maintaining careful distance from the others while presenting a united front to the unknown newcomers. Admiral Korath commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Talon's Edge, a massive dreadnought from the warrior species known as the Keth. His people were descended from predators who had evolved on a world where everything either fought or died, and their ships reflected this philosophy. The Talon's Edge bristled with enough firepower to crack a moon, its hull scarred from dozens of battles against pirates, rebels, and the occasional rogue AI that still haunted the galaxy's outer regions. Standing beside Korath on the bridge was Ambassador Quill, a graceful being from the diplomatic species called the Mediators. Where the Keth were built for war, the Mediators had evolved for communication, their sensitive neural networks capable of detecting emotional states through electromagnetic fields, and their voices able to produce harmonic frequencies that could calm aggressive tendencies in most known species. "Admiral," Quill said, her melodious voice carrying undertones of concern, "I'm detecting something highly unusual about the approaching vessel's crew." Korath's scarred hands tightened on the railing of his command platform. "More unusual than a ship with no weapons? Their emotional emanations are calm. Not the calm of predators preparing to strike, but genuine tranquility. There's curiosity, excitement, even what I would interpret as joy. But no fear, no aggression, no defensive preparation." The Admiral's four eyes narrowed as he processed this information. Fear was universal among intelligent species. Even the most powerful civilizations felt fear when encountering the unknown. It was a survival mechanism so fundamental that species without it typically didn't survive long enough to develop space travel. Could they be using some kind of emotional dampening technology? Perhaps artificial beings that don't experience emotions as we understand them? Quill closed her large, silvery eyes and extended her consciousness toward the human ship, her species' natural empathic abilities straining across the vast distance. "No, Admiral. These are biological minds with rich emotional complexity. They're simply not afraid." Before Korath could respond, his communications officer announced the completion of the translation matrix. After 3 hours of mathematical exchanges and linguistic analysis, the combined computing power of the diplomatic fleet had successfully created a basic translation protocol for the newcomer's language. "Admiral," the human captain's voice came through clearly now, translated into Galactic Standard. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel UES Horizon. We come in peace, seeking to establish friendly relations with the civilizations of this region." Korath activated his own communication system, his voice carrying the authority of 5 decades of command. "Captain Chen, I am Admiral Korath of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. On behalf of the Council, I welcome you to our space. However, I must inform you that your approach has been highly irregular." There was a pause before Chen responded, and Korath found himself wondering what expression might be crossing her alien features. "Irregular how, Admiral?" "We've maintained a peaceful course and responded to all communication attempts. Captain Chen, in the entire history of interstellar civilization, no species has ever made first contact without armed escort and defensive preparations. Your ship appears to carry no weapons whatsoever." Another pause, this one shorter. "We saw no need for weapons." The simple statement sent ripples of confusion through the diplomatic fleet. Ambassador Quill's empathic abilities detected waves of bewilderment from the various ships, mixed with what her people would classify as existential uncertainty. "Captain," Quill interjected, her trained diplomatic voice smooth and reassuring, "I am Ambassador Quill of the Mediator species. Perhaps you could help us understand your perspective. How does your species survive without weapons? How do you defend yourselves against hostile forces?" The response came more quickly this time, and there was something in the human captain's tone that Quill's sensitive hearing interpreted as amusement. "Ambassador, I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding about how we approach conflict resolution. We do have weapons on our homeworld, but we found that bringing them to first contact situations tends to create the very problems we're trying to avoid." Admiral Korath's scarred face displayed what his people called the expression of the puzzled predator. "Captain Chen, are you suggesting that your species has achieved some form of universal peace?" "Not exactly, Admiral. We still have conflicts, but we've learned that how you approach a situation often determines its outcome. If you arrive expecting violence, you're much more likely to find it." This statement struck the assembled diplomatic fleet like a quantum torpedo to the hull. Species after species had evolved in environments where immediate defensive action was the difference between survival and extinction. The idea that one might choose to approach the unknown without preparation for combat was so alien that several of the translation computers temporarily malfunctioned while trying to process the conceptual framework. Dr. Reeves, who had been listening to the exchange from the Horizon's bridge, leaned forward to speak into the communication array. "Admiral, Ambassador, this is Dr. Elena Reeves, our xenobiologist. Perhaps I can provide some context." "Please proceed, Dr. Reeves," Quill responded. "Our species evolved on a world with relatively few large predators. Unlike many species, we didn't develop space travel as an escape from a hostile environment, but as an expression of curiosity about what lies beyond our home. Our history certainly includes warfare, but our most significant advances have come through cooperation and peaceful exchange of ideas." Admiral Korath found himself in the unprecedented position of being completely out of his depth. Military Academy had prepared him for dozens of different first contact scenarios, ranging from aggressive expansion attempts to defensive retreats to elaborate deception campaigns, but no one had ever prepared him for a species that simply didn't believe weapons were necessary. "Dr. Reeves," he said carefully, "how did your species deal with other predatory species on your homeworld?" "We adapted them, Admiral. Dogs, cats, horses, cattle. Rather than fighting them, we found ways to coexist that benefited both sides. It's become something of a specialty of ours. The concept of adaptation rather than domination sent another wave of confusion through the fleet." Ambassador Quill's empathic senses detected what could only be described as cognitive dissonance from multiple species simultaneously. Captain Chen's voice returned to the communication channel. "Admiral, we understand that our approach might seem unusual, but we'd like to propose a simple demonstration of our intentions. We're prepared to submit to any security scans you deem necessary, and we'd welcome representatives from your fleet aboard our ship." This offer created immediate chaos in the diplomatic fleet. The idea of boarding an unknown vessel without understanding its defensive capabilities was so fundamentally opposed to standard protocol that several species representatives began simultaneous objections. "Captain," Admiral Korath said, raising his voice to cut through the diplomatic chatter on his bridge, "that's a generous offer, but surely you understand that we cannot risk our personnel on an unknown vessel without proper security assessments." "Of course, Admiral. But consider this. If we meant you harm, would we really make such an offer? And if we have some hidden capability that could threaten your people, wouldn't that same capability make our choice to arrive unarmed even more significant?" The logic was sound, but it was also completely outside the framework of galactic military doctrine. Ambassador Quill found herself in the unusual position of being fascinated by a species' psychological profile while simultaneously being terrified by the implications. "Captain Chen," she said, "would you be willing to answer some questions about your species' history and motivations?" "Absolutely, Ambassador. We have nothing to hide." "How many wars has your species fought?" "Thousands, unfortunately." "Our history isn't entirely peaceful. And you still chose to approach us unarmed?" "Because of our history, Ambassador, not in spite of it. We've learned that violence usually stems from fear and misunderstanding. Remove the fear, and you often remove the need for violence." Admiral Korath felt something he hadn't experienced in his 50 years of military service. Complete strategic confusion. Every instinct told him that this was either an elaborate trap or evidence of a species so naive that they couldn't possibly have survived long enough to develop interstellar travel. But the evidence contradicted both possibilities. "Captain Chen," he said finally, "I'm going to make a decision that will either be remembered as the most brilliant or most foolish act of my career. I'm accepting your offer. A small diplomatic team will board your vessel for preliminary contact." "Excellent, Admiral. We're preparing to receive your representatives, Doctor." "Reeves, would you like to show them around?" As the diplomatic shuttle prepared to leave the Talon's edge, Admiral Korath found himself wondering if he was about to witness the beginning of a new era in galactic relations, or if he was sending his people into the most sophisticated trap in the history of interstellar politics. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn something entirely new about what it meant to be intelligent life among the stars. The shuttle bay of the UES Horizon was unlike anything the diplomatic team had ever seen. Instead of the stark militaristic efficiency that characterized most starship interiors, the human vessel felt somehow comfortable. The walls were painted in soft, warm colors, and there were actual plants growing in carefully maintained containers along the corridors. Ambassador Quill extended her empathic senses as they disembarked, immediately detecting something that made her neural networks sing with harmonics of surprise. The emotional emanations from the humans waiting to greet them were genuine: joy, curiosity, excitement, and welcome. No deception, no hidden agendas, no carefully masked hostility. It was the first time in her career that she had encountered such authentic, peaceful intent, and it left her momentarily speechless. Dr. Reeves stepped forward, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a worn smile. "Welcome aboard the Horizon. I'm Doctor
Elena Reeves. We're honored to meet you."
As the diplomatic team began their tour of the human ship, they slowly began to understand that they weren't just making contact with a new species, they were encountering a completely different way of thinking about existence itself. The tour of the UES Horizon lasted 6 hours, and by the end of it, the diplomatic team was more confused than when they had started. Everything about the human vessel contradicted their understanding of how intelligent species operated in space. Commander Zex, a tactical specialist from the militaristic hegemony species, found himself staring at what the humans called a recreation deck, with something approaching disbelief. The entire section was devoted to activities that served no apparent survival function: games, art displays, music performance areas, and what Dr. Reeves had explained was a library where humans went to read stories that weren't true. "Dr. Reeves," Zex said, his translator struggling with his species' complex tonal language, "I must ask about the allocation of space on your vessel. This entire deck could have housed additional defensive systems or emergency supplies, yet you've dedicated it to entertainment?" Dr. Reeves smiled, an expression that the diplomatic team was beginning to recognize as the human indicator for non-threatening amusement. "Commander Zex, this is a colony ship carrying 3,000 people on a journey that took 12 years. Mental health and cultural continuity are just as important as physical survival." "But the risk assessment," insisted Quell, a probability specialist from the hyperlogical computation species. "Dedicating valuable ship resources to non-essential activities reduces overall survival chances by at least 18%. "Does it?" Dr. Reeves asked gently. "Commander, what happens to your people during extended space voyages without recreational outlets?" Zex considered this question with the thoroughness his species was known for. Depression rates increased by 47%, suicide rates by 23%, and violent incidents by 61%. And how do those statistics affect overall mission success? The question hung in the recycled air of the recreation deck like a small revelation. Quell's internal processors worked through the implications, calculating and recalculating the variables. Mental health issues reduced mission efficiency by 34%, which means that recreational facilities actually improve survival odds by 16% over their resource cost. Ambassador Quill, who had been quietly observing the exchange while monitoring the emotional states of both the diplomatic team and their human hosts, spoke up. "Dr. Reeves, your species appears to approach survival from a fundamentally different perspective than most civilizations. You optimized for psychological well-being rather than immediate physical security. We've learned that the two are inseparable, Dr. Reeves replied. "A psychologically healthy crew makes better decisions, works more effectively together, and adapts more successfully to unexpected challenges." This concept struck the diplomatic team like a wave of cognitive dissonance. Most species had developed space travel as an escape from hostile homeworlds, where immediate physical threats were the primary concern. The idea of optimizing for mental health over immediate defensive capability was so foreign that several team members requested clarification through their translators. Their tour continued through sections of the ship that challenged every assumption about interstellar vessel design. The medical bay was filled with equipment designed not just for emergency treatment, but for preventive care and psychological support. The work areas were designed for collaboration rather than hierarchical efficiency. Even the ship's cafeteria was arranged to encourage social interaction rather than rapid feeding. But it was when they reached the ship's decision-making center that the diplomatic team encountered their greatest conceptual shock. "This is our council chamber," Captain Chen explained, as she led them into a circular room with comfortable seating arranged in concentric rings. "Major decisions about our mission are made here through collaborative discussion involving representatives from all ship departments." Commander Zex stared at the seating arrangement with barely concealed horror. "Captain, this appears to be designed for group consultation rather than clear command authority. How do you maintain discipline? How do you ensure rapid response to threats? The same way you do, Commander. Through clear protocols and trained personnel. The difference is that our protocols emphasize consultation and consensus building whenever time permits. But what happens during emergencies when immediate action is required?" Captain Chen smiled. "Then I give orders and people follow them. The difference is that because we've involved them in the decision-making process during normal operations, they trust that emergency orders are necessary and well-considered." Quell's probability processors nearly overloaded trying to calculate the efficiency variables of such a system. Captain, decision-making by consensus introduces multiple failure points and reduces response time by significant margins. In some situations, yes, but it also means that when we do make decisions, they're better informed and more likely to succeed. And more importantly, everyone understands why we're making them. Ambassador Quill found herself struggling to process the emotional implications of what she was observing. The humans weren't just operating without weapons, they were operating without authoritarian hierarchy, without fear-based motivation, and without the assumption that survival required domination of others. Captain Chen, she said carefully, I must ask a direct question. Has your species encountered hostile alien life before? Not yet, Chen replied, but we've certainly prepared for the possibility. How do you prepare for hostility without weapons? We prepare by being the kind of species that others have no reason to be hostile toward. The statement was so simple that it took several minutes for the diplomatic team to fully process its implications. Most galactic civilizations prepared for hostility by developing superior firepower and defensive capabilities. The humans were preparing by attempting to eliminate the motivations for hostility in the first place. Dr. Vosh, a xenopsychologist from the Analytical Insight species, leaned forward with intense curiosity. Captain, this approach assumes that hostile intent is based on rational fears or needs that can be addressed through communication and cooperation. That's generally been our experience, Dr. Vosh. But what about species that are hostile due to fundamental psychological drives? Predators who attack simply because it's their nature? Captain Chen considered this question seriously before responding. Vash, we've encountered predators on our homeworld that attacked humans on sight, but we found that even the most dangerous predators can be managed if you understand their needs and motivations. Sometimes the solution is providing alternative food sources, sometimes it's establishing clear territorial boundaries, sometimes it's simply avoiding their territory altogether. And if those approaches fail, then we defend ourselves. But we try the other options first. The concept of defense as a last resort rather than a first preparation was so alien to galactic thinking that several members of the diplomatic team had to sit down to process the implications. Commander Zex was the first to voice what they were all thinking. Captain, with respect to your species' obvious intelligence and good intentions, your approach seems to depend on a level of rationality and good faith that our experience suggests is extremely rare in the galaxy. Commander, may I ask how many species in your Galactic Council regularly engage in warfare with each other? Zex considered the question. Currently, none. The Council structure and mutual defense agreements have maintained peace for over 2,000 years. And before the Council was established, warfare was constant and devastating. So cooperation and mutual benefit can work, even among species that were previously hostile? Yes, but that cooperation was established through superior firepower and the threat of mutual destruction. Commander, what if it could be established through superior cooperation and the promise of mutual benefit instead? The question hung in the chamber like a small revolution in thinking. Ambassador Quill extended her empathic senses throughout the diplomatic team, detecting a complex mixture of emotions, skepticism, curiosity, hope, and something that her species would classify as existential longing. It was Dr. Vosh who finally broke the silence. Captain, your species is proposing a fundamental redesign of how intelligent life interacts in the galaxy. Not proposing, Dr. Vosh. Demonstrating.
And if you're wrong?
If the galaxy contains species that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be cooperated with, and will view your peaceful approach as weakness to be exploited? Captain Chen's expression grew serious, and for the first time during the tour, the diplomatic team detected something that their various sensors interpreted as resolved determination. Vash, if we encounter a species that truly cannot coexist peacefully with others, then the galaxy has a much bigger problem than one unarmed colony ship. What do you mean? I mean that such a species would be a threat to everyone, not just to humans. And if that's the case, then the galaxy would need to work together to address that threat. Which brings us back to cooperation and mutual benefit. The simplicity and logic of the statement struck the diplomatic team like a mathematical proof that couldn't be refuted. If humanity's approach failed because they encountered truly hostile aliens, then those same aliens would threaten everyone else. The logical response would be cooperative defense, which would validate the human approach to problem solving. Quell's probability processors calculated the implications and arrived at a conclusion that made her neural networks hum with surprise. The human approach was not just ethically appealing, but strategically sound. Captain, Ambassador Quill said slowly, I believe we need to arrange a formal presentation to the full Galactic Council. "We would be honored, Ambassador." As the diplomatic team prepared to return to their fleet, they carried with them something that no first contact in galactic history had ever produced: the possibility that everything they thought they knew about survival among the stars might be wrong, and that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way. The central chamber of the Galactic Council had been designed to accommodate the largest gathering of diverse intelligent species in known history. The massive spherical structure floating in space at the junction of 7 major hyperspace routes could house representatives from all 347 member civilizations simultaneously. Never had it felt more inadequate than in the 3 days following the first formal report on humanity. Council Speaker Thane stood at the center of the chamber, his massive stone-like frame dwarfed by the chaos surrounding him. Representatives from dozens of species were engaged in heated discussions, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the chamber's translation system struggled to process. Crystalline beings pulsed with rapid color changes indicating extreme agitation. Gaseous entities swirled in patterns that their species used to express fundamental uncertainty, and several of the more militaristic races had activated defensive postures that hadn't been seen in the chamber for centuries. "Order!" Thane's voice boomed across the chamber, amplified by systems designed to cut through any conceivable noise. "We will have order in this chamber!" Slowly, the chaos subsided, though the emotional temperature remained high. Ambassador Quill, who had been granted special permission to remain in the chamber despite not being a full council member, extended her empathic senses and immediately regretted it. The combined emotional output of hundreds of confused and frightened representatives was overwhelming. "Speaker Thane," called out General Vorthak of the Predator Coalition, his species translator turning his aggressive pheromone communications into audible words, "we demand an immediate military assessment of this human threat." "What threat, General?" Thane asked. "According to all reports, they have no weapons." "That's exactly the threat." Vorthak's response triggered a wave of agreement from the more militaristic species. "No species survives long enough to develop interstellar travel without weapons, unless they have something far more dangerous than conventional armaments." Synth, the Council's chief xenobiologist and representative of the hyperlogical analysis species, projected a holographic display of data into the center of the chamber. General Vorthak raises a valid point. "Our probability models suggest several possible explanations for the humans' approach, none of which are reassuring." "Explain," Thane commanded. "First possibility. They have developed weapons technology so advanced that conventional sensors cannot detect it. Second possibility. They are a hive mind species with capabilities we cannot comprehend. Third possibility. They are advanced scouts for a larger force that will arrive once they have assessed our capabilities. Fourth possibility. They are a parasitic species that infiltrates other civilizations from within." Each possibility sent ripples of concern through the chamber. The Council had protocols for dealing with conventional threats, but the idea of facing something so far outside their experience was deeply unsettling. "Dr. Synth," interrupted Professor Kell, representative of the scholarly illumination species, "you've omitted a fifth possibility, which is that they're telling the truth." The statement created a moment of absolute silence in the chamber. Professor Kell, whose species was known for their philosophical insights, continued speaking into the quiet. "What if they really are a species that has learned to resolve conflicts through cooperation rather than domination? What if they genuinely believe that mutual benefit is more effective than mutual threat?" "Impossible," declared Commander Rex of the Fortress species, whose people had evolved in underground caverns while under constant siege from surface predators. "Survival requires strength. Cooperation without strength is just delayed extinction." "Is it, Commander?" Professor Kell asked. "How many species in this chamber have grown stronger through Council membership than they were as independent civilizations?" The question struck the heart of the Council's fundamental purpose. The Galactic Council had been created after millennia of devastating warfare between spacefaring civilizations. Member species had discovered that cooperation and mutual defense were far more effective than constant conflict, but that cooperation had been built on a foundation of mutual deterrence and carefully balanced power structures. Ambassador Quill requested permission to speak. "Honored representatives, I spent 6 hours aboard the human vessel observing their crew and studying their approach to problem solving. I can confirm that their peaceful intentions appear genuine. But more importantly, I believe we're asking the wrong question." "What question should we be asking?" Thane inquired. "Not whether they're telling the truth about being peaceful, but whether they might be right about peace being more effective than warfare." This statement triggered another wave of agitation through the chamber. Representative Zix of the defensive species, whose people had survived by building impregnable fortress worlds, flickered through several colors before responding. Ambassador, with respect, your species evolved to be empathic mediators. You may be predisposed to see peaceful intentions even where they don't exist. That's possible, Representative Zix. But consider this. If I'm wrong about their intentions, we lose nothing by maintaining our current defensive postures while observing them. If I'm right about their approach being more effective than ours, we could be witnessing the next stage of galactic evolution. Dr. Vosh, who had been part of the initial diplomatic team, projected her own analysis into the chamber. Honored representatives, I've completed a preliminary psychological profile of the human species based on my observations. They display several traits that are unprecedented among known intelligent species. Elaborate, commanded Thane. They appear to have evolved cooperative instincts that override individual survival drives. They consistently choose group benefit over personal advantage. Most significantly, they seem to derive genuine pleasure from solving problems that benefit others, even when there's no direct benefit to themselves. That suggests either advanced social programming or parasitic behavior modification, General Vorthak interjected. General, I considered those possibilities, but their neural patterns and emotional responses are inconsistent with any known form of external control. They appear to be naturally altruistic. The concept of natural altruism among intelligent species was so fundamentally alien that several representatives requested clarification through multiple translation protocols. Speaker Thane raised his massive hand for silence. Dr. Vosh, are you suggesting that humanity represents an evolutionary path toward cooperative intelligence? Speaker, I'm suggesting that humanity may have discovered something that we've all been missing, that cooperation isn't just a survival strategy, but a path to advancement beyond what individual species can achieve alone. This idea struck the chamber like a controlled quantum explosion. For millennia, galactic civilizations had operated on the principle that strength came from superior technology, larger populations, or better defensive capabilities. The idea that strength might come from the willingness to cooperate with others was revolutionary. Representative Mordak of the expansion species, whose people had built their civilization through conquest and absorption of other cultures, spoke up with barely contained agitation. This is idealistic nonsense. In the real galaxy, cooperation is only possible between equals, and equality is only maintained through superior firepower. Representative Mordak, Professor Kell replied, may I point out that your own species has been more successful as a member of this council than during your previous expansion period? That's different. We joined the council because the alternative was destruction by the combined fleets of 47 other species. Exactly. You discovered that cooperation was more beneficial than conquest. The humans are simply starting from cooperation instead of working their way toward it through conflict. Ambassador Quill detected a shift in the emotional atmosphere of the chamber. The initial fear and confusion were beginning to give way to something more complex, curiosity mixed with hope, tempered by deep-seated skepticism. Council Speaker Thane consulted with his advisors for several minutes before addressing the chamber again. Representatives, we appear to be facing an unprecedented situation. I propose the following course of action. The chamber fell silent. We will invite the humans to establish a permanent embassy within council space, with full diplomatic immunity and access to our trade networks. However, they will be under constant but discreet observation by our intelligence services. Speaker, General Vorthak objected, that level of access could be catastrophic if they represent some form of advanced threat. General, if they represent an advanced threat, keeping them at a distance will only delay the inevitable conflict. If they're genuine in their peaceful intentions, then this arrangement allows us to study their approach, while benefiting from their cooperation. Dr. Since logical processes calculated the implications. Speaker, you're proposing to treat an unknown species as trustworthy until proven otherwise. This violates every established security protocol. Dr. Synth, our established security protocols have never encountered a species that arrived completely unarmed. Either our protocols are inadequate, or this situation is so unique that new protocols are required. The vote was closer than any major council decision in recorded history. 213 species voted in favor of Thane's proposal, 134 voted against, and 17 abstained pending further data. As the chamber began to empty, Ambassador Quill found herself wondering if they had just made the most progressive decision in galactic history, or if they had just invited a threat beyond their comprehension into the heart of their civilization. Either way, the galaxy was about to discover whether cooperation could truly be more powerful than conflict. 3 days later, when the U.S. Horizon was granted permission to establish humanity's first interstellar embassy, Captain Sarah Chen made an announcement that would echo through galactic history. To our new friends in the Galactic Council, we offer not just peace, but partnership. We bring no weapons, but we bring something we hope will prove more valuable: the absolute conviction that we are stronger together than we ever could be apart. The age of cooperative space exploration was about to begin. 6 months after humanity's arrival in Council space, the galaxy was beginning to understand that they had not simply made contact with a new species. They had encountered a catalyst for transformation that would reshape the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization. The human embassy was unlike any diplomatic installation in galactic history. Rather than the fortress-like structures favored by most species, the humans had constructed their embassy as a series of interconnected modules that could be easily reconfigured, expanded, or relocated as needed. The central hub featured a massive transparent dome that offered a spectacular view of the nebula surrounding Council Station, while the surrounding structures housed everything from research laboratories to cultural exchange centers. Most remarkably, the embassy was completely open to visitors from any member species. No security checkpoints, no restricted areas, no defensive systems of any kind. Beings from across the galaxy could simply walk in, explore, and interact with humans in an environment designed to encourage casual conversation and spontaneous collaboration. Dr. Elena Reeves, now serving as Earth's chief cultural liaison, stood in the embassy's central garden watching a group of crystalline children play with human holographic toys while their parents discussed agricultural techniques with a team of Earth botanists. 6 months ago, such a scene would have been impossible. Most species kept their young in secure environments and shared technological information only through formal diplomatic channels. "Dr. Reeves," came a familiar harmonic voice behind her. Ambassador Quill approached with her characteristic grace, though her silvery features showed signs of the stress that had become common among council officials. "Ambassador, good to see you. How are the integration discussions proceeding?" Quill's expression shifted to what her species used to indicate complex emotional states. "That's actually why I'm here. We need to discuss some unexpected developments." They walked together toward one of the embassy's many informal meeting areas, passing through a section where a group of hegemony military engineers were enthusiastically debating infrastructure design with human architects. The sight still amazed Reeves. The hegemony had spent centuries perfecting fortress-like structures designed to withstand siege warfare, but their engineers had become fascinated with human concepts of modular, adaptive architecture. "What kind of developments?" Reeves asked, as they settled into comfortable seating overlooking the nebula. "3 major issues," Quill replied. "First, we're experiencing what our sociologists are calling cooperative cascades throughout Council space. Species that have maintained formal diplomatic relationships for centuries are suddenly engaging in direct collaboration projects. That sounds positive? It is, but it's also destabilizing established power structures. The hegemony's military leadership is struggling to maintain cohesion when their personnel are more interested in joint engineering projects than combat training. The analytical species are having similar issues with their researchers abandoning individual projects in favor of collaborative studies." Reeves nodded thoughtfully. They had anticipated that human approaches to cooperation might influence other species, but the speed and scope of the change had surprised everyone. "What's the second issue?" "Economic disruption. Your open-source approach to technology sharing is causing chaos in established trade relationships. Why negotiate complex licensing agreements when humans simply give away innovations for free?" This had been another surprise. Earth's decision to freely share most of their technological developments with any interested species had seemed natural to the humans, but it was causing fundamental shifts in the galactic economy. Species that had built their prosperity on controlling access to specific technologies were finding their advantages evaporating as humans taught anyone who was interested how to replicate and improve upon Earth's innovations. And the third issue? Ambassador Quill's expression shifted to something that her species used to indicate existential uncertainty. "Some of our member species are beginning to question whether they need weapons at all." The statement hung in the recycled air of the embassy like a small revolution. Reeves felt her breath catch as she processed the implications. Which species? Initially, the more analytical and philosophical civilizations. The Illumination species formally decommissioned half their defense fleet last week, stating that their resources could be better used for research and cultural development. The computation species are performing detailed analyses of the cost-benefit ratios of military spending versus cooperative development. And the military species? That's where it gets complicated. Even some of the warrior cultures are beginning to ask questions they've never asked before. As if summoned by their conversation, Commander Zex of the hegemony approached their seating area. The tactical specialist had become a frequent visitor to the embassy, initially as part of ongoing security assessments, but increasingly as someone genuinely interested in understanding human approaches to problem-solving. "Dr. Reeves, Ambassador Quill," he said, his translator converting his complex tonal language into standard audio. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Commander. Please join us." Zex settled into a chair designed to accommodate his species' unique physiology. "Dr. Reeves, I have a question that my superiors have asked me to investigate." "Of course." "In the 6 months since your arrival, 17 different species have approached us requesting joint military exercises focused on cooperative defense rather than individual combat superiority. This is unprecedented in galactic military history." Reeves waited for him to continue. "The question is, how did you know this would happen?" "We didn't," Reeves replied honestly. "We hoped that demonstrating cooperative approaches might inspire others to try them, but the speed and scale of the response has surprised us as much as anyone." "Reeves, my species has analyzed thousands of different strategic approaches over our history. We've never encountered a strategy that succeeds by inspiring others to adopt it voluntarily." Ambassador Quill leaned forward with interest. "Commander, how do you interpret this phenomenon from a military perspective?" Zex was quiet for several moments, his internal processes clearly working through complex tactical calculations. "Ambassador, from a military perspective, what the humans have accomplished is impossible." "How so?" "They've achieved strategic dominance without weapons, territorial control without conquest, and alliance building without coercion. According to every military theory developed by every known species, these things cannot be done." "But they have been done," Reeves pointed out. "Yes. Which means either our military theories are fundamentally flawed, or humans represent something entirely outside our understanding of strategic thinking." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Vash, who appeared agitated in a way that her normally calm analytical species rarely displayed. "Dr. Reeves, we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "What's wrong?" "We've just received reports of a first contact situation in the outer spiral. A previously unknown species has been detected approaching Council space, and according to preliminary sensor data, they're heavily armed and showing aggressive postures." Reeves felt her stomach tighten. This was the scenario that had worried many Council members. What would happen when humanity's peaceful approach encountered truly hostile aliens? How are the Council forces responding? "That's the problem, Dr. Aspiration," Vash replied. "Normal protocol would be to dispatch a defensive fleet and establish a containment perimeter. But 17 different species have requested permission to try what they're calling the human approach instead." Commander Zex's expression shifted to what his species used to indicate tactical confusion. "Dr. Vash, are you saying that multiple Council species want to approach an unknown hostile force without weapons?" "Not without weapons, Commander. They want to approach with weapons available but not deployed following human-style diplomatic protocols." Ambassador Quill's empathic senses detected waves of complex emotions from all the beings in their immediate area. "This could be catastrophic if the humans' approach doesn't work with truly hostile species." Or, Reeves said quietly, "It could be the moment when the galaxy discovers whether cooperation really is more powerful than conflict." Within hours, the decision was made. A joint fleet representing 32 different Council species would approach the unknown vessels using modified human diplomatic protocols. Weapons would be present but not activated, shields would be available but not raised, and the initial contact would be attempted through mathematical communication and offers of cultural exchange. Captain Sarah Chen, who had been monitoring the situation from the embassy, requested permission to accompany the diplomatic fleet. Her request was initially denied due to safety concerns, but when 18 different species formally stated that they would feel more confident with human guidance during the mission, the Council reluctantly agreed. As the UES Horizon prepared to join the largest cooperative first contact mission in galactic history, Chen found herself reflecting on how much had changed in just 6 months. When they had first arrived in Council space, they had been an unknown quantity in a galaxy built on mutual deterrence and careful power balances. Now they were leading a revolution in how intelligent species interacted with each other. The approaching ships belonged to a species that would later be known as the Convergent. Their vessels bristled with weapons technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Council had seen. Their initial communications were filled with hostile intentions, and their behavior patterns suggested a civilization built entirely around conquest and domination. They were, in other words, exactly the kind of species that the galaxy's traditional approach had been designed to handle. But when the joint diplomatic fleet arrived at the edge of Council space to meet them, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the expected battle between incompatible philosophies, the galaxy witnessed the first successful conversion of a hostile species to cooperative behavior through patient diplomacy, demonstrated benefit, and the kind of absolute confidence that comes from knowing that peace is not weakness but the ultimate expression of strength. The Convergent, like so many others before them, discovered that there was something irresistibly attractive about a galaxy where species genuinely worked together for mutual benefit. Within a year of humanity's arrival, the Galactic Council had grown from 347 member species to over 400, with dozens more requesting membership every month. Conflicts between species had decreased by over 60%. Technological advancement had accelerated dramatically, and for the first time in galactic history, intelligent species were exploring the universe not as competitors fighting for resources, but as partners working toward common goals. The humans had arrived carrying no weapons, but they had brought something far more powerful. Proof that there was a better way to live among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. Us.